LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the November 11th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me and my emotional support cat Cheech here for the first Monday Media Mixup after Trump's re-election. And I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips that I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. You can see the title of my video is Trump won because 10 million 2020 Biden voters did not vote in 2024. And you're going to see a lot of talk about why Trump won and why Kamala Harris lost. Democrats have been doing a lot of finger pointing. They're actually, a lot of the data isn't really in, and some of these numbers could change, but generally, if you look at the total popular vote numbers is what I'm talking about. Here's like the popular vote of 2020 compared to 2024. You can see Trump went up by maybe 600,000 votes there, but Harris lost 10 million, 10.1 million votes less. I mean, there's still some votes to be counted. But it's not going to change that much. And so Trump basically did the same. And a lot of the analysis you see where it shows he's doing better and better in, black men, Latino men, working class whites, and all sorts of other group, where they say his margins are better. But what I'm waiting to see when all the data comes out is, did he do better? Did he get more of those people? Or did the Democrats, their voters, just drop off? And there are a lot of reasons that could happen. I mean, the number one issue, I think, is people being disillusioned by high inflation, by not getting results, especially working class people. And I'll be showing you I'm going to show you Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna both talking about that. Down in the video description, you can see short summaries of all 11 clips I'm going to be using. And I'm going to start with political comedy. Saturday Night Live made a couple jokes on their Weekend Update program that I thought were both humorous and also help with my main topic. And I edited together one of the Colin Jost jokes about Democrats looking inward and trying to figure out why they lost. And then one of the reasons I think Trump won that people are going to be disappointed about over in this clip.
But don't you guys worry. If I know Democrats, they're going to take a long look in the mirror, learn from their mistakes, and then run Biden again in 2028.
A new report shows that after Donald Trump was elected, the wealth of the world's 10 richest people grew by more than $60 billion. Yep, the richest people immediately got richer. But don't worry, I'm sure yours is coming soon, Earl.
That was funny. The cat just hit my camera, so everything is pushed off to the side a little bit here. I'll try to fix that in a minute while we're watching the next clip. But I think working class voters who think that voting for Trump is going to actually help them, I think they're going to be disappointed in terms of his policies. I think Biden had, 20% increase in prices during his administration, mostly not his fault. It was worse in a lot of other countries. A lot of it had to do with the pandemic, but that was the huge weight that Kamala Harris had to deal with, the weight of inflation. And this is kind of bugging me here. Hold on a second. I'm going to try to fix this a little bit. Ooh, a little bit too much. Here. Is that better? Almost got it right. Can't believe Chong jumped up and knocked the camera. But anyway, And then, of course, the first joke Colin Jost was talking about how the Democrats are going to undergo this introspection and then rerun Joe Biden. Well, Joe Biden got 10 million more votes. Is it because he got more white people to vote for him than Kamala Harris? I mean, I believe he did, but that's some of the data we'll have to wait to find out about. I'm going to show you the news summaries from longest to shortest now, and I'm going to show you NBC News Meet the Press first, which is the longest, even though I cut out the Steve Kornacki part. If I had included the Steve Kornacki part, it would have been like 10 or 11 minutes long. And Steve Kornacki's analysis never even showed you this. The big difference from 2020 to 2024 is 10 million less Democratic votes, not only 600,000 more for Trump, 10 million less for the Democratic candidate. So it wasn't really that worth showing, and so I cut that part out. But I thought the rest of the NBC News Meet the Press news summary was okay, which I will talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. President-elect Donald Trump is now returning to the White House after an historic political realignment. Mr. Trump swept all 7 battleground states after NBC News projected overnight that he won Arizona. He also tore down the Democratic blue wall and is poised to become the first Republican in 2 decades to win the national popular vote. President-elect Trump, charged with plotting to overturn the last election, now establishing himself as a transformational political force, reshaping American politics in his own image.
We made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that. We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible.
I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America.
This decisive victory should shake the Democrat establishment to its core.
This is a new dawn of Republican leadership. With President Trump and J.D. Vance in the White House, we are going to advance an agenda that is an American agenda.
We're going to have the most aggressive first 100 days agenda that anybody's seen in a modern era.
Now, those victories powered by populist frustration, with exit polls showing 3/4 of voters feel dissatisfied or angry about the way things are going in the country. Nearly half of voters saying they strongly disapprove of President Biden. The share who say they've gotten worse off under the current administration, the highest ever in exit polls that have asked the question, surpassing the Great Recession. Vice President Kamala Harris conceding defeat.
Look, I am so proud of the race we ran and the way we ran it. Now, I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election.
Democrats now grappling with their stunning loss and trying to figure out what went wrong.
Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. Kamala, I think, still would have won, but she may have been stronger, having taken her case to the public sooner.
I think people never got to know Kamala Harris during the time she was in this campaign.
If the goal is to win elections on Twitter, then you should embrace movements like defund the police. But if the goal is to win elections in the real world, where it matters, then you have to appeal to working class people of color.
The party itself has increasingly become a smarty pants, suburban, college-educated party.
I take issue sometimes with people saying, oh, the quote-unquote left is the reason why this is happening. The ultimate problem is our ability to clearly and forthrightly advocate for an agenda that clearly champions the working class.
Joe Biden's decision to run for president again was a catastrophic mistake.
But we can all unite in knowing that Joe Biden would have lost and deserves a lot of blame for the situation that we're in.
The focus now shifts to what President-elect Trump will do in his second term, with a Republican Senate majority and presidential power expanded by the Supreme Court. At this hour, control of the House remains up for grabs, with 19 races still uncalled. On the campaign trail, Mr. Trump made many promises to voters.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program of criminals in the history of America. If these companies don't make their products here in the USA, then they will be forced to pay a very stiff tariff. And I will cut your energy prices in half within 12 months. For people that are using IVF, which is fertilization, the government is going to pay for it, or we're going to get or mandate your insurance company to pay for it. We will cut your taxes, end inflation, slash your prices, raise your wages, and bring thousands and thousands of factories back to America.
President Biden has invited President-elect Trump to the White House on Wednesday. A long-standing tradition Trump didn't extend to President Biden in 2020. I spoke to the president-elect on the phone 48 hours after his victory and asked him what he believes his mandate is. He told me it's to bring common sense back to the country. As for day one, he told me, I think we have a lot of firsts, and brought up strengthening the border. I pressed him on the price tag of his mass deportation plan, which experts say could be in the billions. He told me, quote, it's not a question of price tag. Really, we have no choice. When people have killed and murdered, they're not staying here. There is no price tag. For more on all of this, I'm joined by national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Steve, historic results. Break it down for us.
Okay, and if you want to see the Steve Kornacki report, there's a link down in the video description under sources to the entire November 10th NBC News Meet the Press episode, available free on YouTube, so you can watch that after. I thought that a lot of the information, it didn't answer my main question, which is when you see Trump gaining in terms of his margins, his percentages, does that mean that he got more of those people or that the Democrats got less? Because it looks to me more like Democrats got less because of the difference between 2020 and 2024. Trump basically got the same votes. Somehow the Democratic vote was suppressed. And by that, I mean that people decided they didn't want to vote for a variety of reasons. Maybe it was harder to vote than in 2020 with not as many mail-in ballot opportunities in some states. But also, one of the things about Trump's campaign that wasn't really reported on there. Here's Chong the cat. Here's the one who knocked over the camera. I have to grab him here. So now you've seen both Cheech and Chong the cats. They're a little bit traumatized because, they're only a little over 1 year old. So they've never lived through a Trump presidency before. So they don't really know what to expect. But I'm trying to help them get through this difficult time. I hope you're getting through this difficult time. And I'm going to get to the next news summary. I think I kind of interrupted my own train of thought there, but one of the things I saw, Richie Torres, Representative Richie Torres, in that last montage from NBC News Meet the Press, talking about how he blamed defund the police. Kamala Harris was not a defund the police person. She was basically a cop. She was a prosecutor. She was not a progressive prosecutor. I've talked about that many times, how she was a centrist. So it's kind of disturbing to see how some corporate centrist Democrats are blaming the left of the Democratic Party for the loss. And if you're looking at more of our base not turning out, 10 million Democratic voters not turning out, that is more a problem of not giving your base a reason to vote for you, not having people switch over to Donald Trump when, Donald Trump only got 600,000 more votes, at least so far in the counting. But now let's move on to the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. It's Jonathan Karl and Rachel Scott reporting on the same facts, same amount of time. Let's see who does it better over here.
Good morning. Welcome to This Week. In just 71 days, Donald Trump will be sworn in again as President of the United States. His comeback victory, unlike anything we have ever seen in American history. Just take a look at the final results. With Arizona now projected for Trump, he locks in a sweeping victory in every single battleground state. And Trump did more than that. He made big gains with young voters and with Latinos, doing better among Hispanic voters than any Republican presidential candidate since the first exit polls were conducted in 1976. He even did better among women than when he ran against Joe Biden. He also made significant gains in some of the most democratic places in the country, doing better in places like Brooklyn, New Jersey, and Chicago. And in deep blue California, Donald Trump is on track to do better than any Republican in 2 decades. And he was running against a Californian. California voters also rejected liberal policies on taxes, rent control, and crime. They voted overwhelmingly to approve Proposition 36, which imposes tougher penalties for shoplifting and drug possession. Both the mayor of San Francisco and the liberal district attorney in Los Angeles were voted out. A rejection of liberal policies, particularly on crime, in some of the most liberal jurisdictions in the United States. Regardless of what you think about the outcome, whether you are happy about it or fearful, this week was a victory for democracy. Turnout was near record highs, and when the votes were counted, the losing candidate didn't cry foul or make false allegations of election fraud or try to overturn the will of the voters. She gave a gracious concession speech, and the outgoing president promised to ensure a smooth and peaceful transfer of power, with Biden and Trump scheduled to meet at the White House on Wednesday. Democracy worked, even if it brought us a president-elect who many argued is a threat to democracy. Now the question turns to what the man who tried to overturn a Democratic election 4 years ago will do with his mandate. In a moment, I'll speak with Vivek Ramaswamy, who was with Donald Trump on election night and in the immediate aftermath. But first, we turn to Rachel Scott, who covered the Trump campaign for us and is now in West Palm Beach, Florida, reporting on the Trump transition. Rachel, we know we have a new chief of staff, Susie Wiles. What's your sense? You've been talking to folks. What is her role going to be going forward?
Yeah, well, John, it's hard to find an advisor that was more critical to the success of President-elect Donald Trump's third bid for the White House than Susie Wiles. She is a longtime Republican advisor. She likes to remain out of the spotlight, work behind the scenes. She was largely credited with helping Governor Ron DeSantis win his victory back in 2018. DeSantis fired her, and ultimately it is Wiles who settled the score. She joined the Trump campaign. She helped President-elect Trump defeat Governor DeSantis in the Republican primary, ultimately helping President-elect Trump win the White House. But she's also been able to pull off something that very few advisors around the president-elect have been able to do. Number one, she's been able to last. She lasted the entirety of the campaign, also commanding the respect of not only the family, allies, but also the president-elect himself, while running a pretty tight ship. And sources tell me that when they do go to the White House, she wants to make sure that she can maintain some type of control over who has access to the president-elect in the Oval Office, especially trying to avoid some of the chaos that we saw during the first administration, which I know you covered all too well, John.
Yeah, that controlling the access is a challenge. I saw roughly 4 chiefs of staff tried to do that. But let me also ask you about Elon Musk, who was arguably Donald Trump's biggest supporter, maybe his most important supporter in the campaign. He's been around a lot. I know you've reported he's been on at least 2 calls with foreign leaders. What's your sense on his role right now?
Yeah, and President-elect Trump has said that Elon Musk, the world's richest man, would oversee some type of government efficiency for the federal government. But it's very clear, John, that what we are learning from our sources is that his significance, his influence is going to stretch far beyond that. He was there during multiple conversations that the president-elect had with foreign leaders. Sources tell us that he was in the room when the president-elect spoke with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky by the phone. At one point, I'm told that the president-elect handed Musk the phone to talk to Zelensky himself. The two were remarking over the Starlink internet communication service that Musk founded. But also he was there as well when the president-elect spoke with the Turkish President Erdogan. Again, this all underscores just how much influence and significance someone like Elon Musk could play in this next administration, John.
All right, the tireless Rachel Scott live in West Palm Beach. Thank you, Rachel. I'm joined now in the studio by former Trump primary opponent turned Trump supporter, Vivek Ramaswamy.
I will have a clip of Vivek Ramaswamy. That's clip 10, the second to last, the penultimate clip, if you're keeping track down in the video description of my clip list. And he will defend deporting people, even dreamers. He'll say, well, if your first act as a 2-year-old in the United States is entering illegally, you don't have a right to stay here. Well, he didn't say the 2-year-old part, but I'm just inferring that based on what he says about dreamers. But you can stay tuned for that. I was a little I don't know, the framing on that ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary from Jonathan Karl there, where Jonathan Karl was like saying it was a victory for democracy because the Democrats conceded the election and the Democratic president invited the winner to the White House for a peaceful transfer of power. I don't know, is it a victory for democracy when there's only one side? There's only one side that accepts the results when they lose? That I don't know if that's a victory for democracy or not, but now let's move on to the next news summary. Almost the same length. These first three are all about 5 minutes, and this is the Fox News Sunday sort of alternate universe, but I'll talk about that more after we watch Shannon Bream give. First, they focus on the wildfires in the Northeast, and that always bugs me in California because we have wildfires now, and they never really, occasionally they focus on them, but they have such a all the news media has a bias, not a partisan political bias, but a bias for covering things that happen close to New York and Washington, D.C. And you'll see that in the news headlines from Shannon Bream. And then they have Lucas Tomlinson at Palm Beach with the Trump campaign, Rich Edson at the White House with the Democrats in the news summary that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. Here's a quick look at your headlines. A firefighter has been killed battling wildfires about 50 miles from New York City. Severe drought has created dangerously dry conditions in the Northeast, and the resulting fires have led to an air quality alert for the Big Apple and surrounding areas. Republicans need just 5 more House seats out of the remaining 20 undecided races in order to maintain control of the House. Democrats need to win 16 to get to the majority. And Arizona becomes the last battleground state. It's been called for President-elect Donald Trump, giving him a total of 312 electoral votes. That's compared to 226 for Vice President Harris. Trump leads in the popular vote by more than 4.5 million votes. In a moment, we'll talk with Republican Congressman Byron Donalds on the new era for the GOP, and also former Democratic presidential candidate Dean Phillips, who mounted a primary challenge against President Biden after repeatedly warning Democrats that Biden's decision to run for re-election could be disastrous. But first, we turn to team coverage. Rich Edson at the White House on President Biden's final months in office. But we begin with Lucas Tomlinson in West Palm Beach near President-elect Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Hello, Lucas.
Shannon, President-elect Donald Trump will return to the White House Wednesday to meet with President Biden to cap what some say is the greatest political comeback since Richard Nixon.
It was a historic realignment, uniting citizens of all backgrounds around a common core of common sense.
Trump is the first candidate in 40 years to sweep the key 2024 swing states, voters firmly rejecting the Biden-Harris agenda. Here are the frontrunners to join key cabinet positions in diplomacy, national and homeland security, law enforcement, and energy to carry out Trump's mandate.
I'm a soldier. The President of the United States calls you to serve, then you have to take that very seriously.
He is a reformer. He is a disruptor. So if asked, I would certainly be willing to serve again. I think it would be an honor of a lifetime.
I'm going to work with the Trump administration, whatever capacity they feel is best. I'm not presumptuous to say they're going to pick me.
Every position he has, there's 20 qualified people banging on the door.
Helping Trump vet the candidates will be his newly appointed White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, the first female to hold the job. Some Democrats, perhaps with an eye on 2028, appear willing to work with Trump.
I want our president to succeed. And our job, my job, is not to wake up every single day and get a crowbar and try to put it in the spokes of the wheel of the Trump administration.
This week, expect more candidates being vetted for cabinet positions to come to Palm Beach. 2 who will not be coming, Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo. President-elect Trump says he has not invited them to join his administration. Shannon?
All right, Lucas Tomlinson in Florida. Lucas, thank you. Joining us now from the White House, Rich Edson. Hello, Rich.
Hello, Shannon. Well, with 71 days left in this administration, officials here say President Biden has plenty left to do before Democrats turn control of the White House and the Senate over to Republicans. Officials say the president is focused on keeping the government open, approving hurricane relief money, passing national defense policy, confirming judges, and overseeing an orderly transition.
Want to have an effective, efficient transition of power. And so we are ready to provide that. As you know, the president invited the president-elect, Donald Trump, to come to the White House.
Well, before Trump moves in, the Biden administration is trying to send more weapons shipments to Ukraine. Officials are also working to approve pending environmental regulations, though a Republican Congress could overturn many of the more recent rules. A source with knowledge of the Trump transition tells Fox News that the incoming team is ready for any effort to Trump-proof new policies contrary to the incoming government's plans, and that the current administration could largely only slow the new one. In the remaining days of the Biden presidency, there have also been calls for the senior liberal Supreme Court Justice, Sonia Sotomayor, to step down. At 70, there are concerns among Democrats about keeping that seat liberal. Democrats who oppose the idea say the Senate may not have enough time to confirm a replacement during Biden's remaining weeks, handing yet another court vacancy over to Trump. And as Hunter Biden faces sentencing on tax charges, the White House maintains the president has no plans to pardon his son. Shannon?
All right, Rich Edson reporting from the White House. Rich, thank you very much. Joining me now, Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds.
And I will have a clip of the Byron Donalds interview, the final clip, just to show how bad Shannon Bream's cross-examination of Republicans is. And when she's like asking Byron Donalds about Trump's promises, or Democratic critics who are now scared that Trump may engage in revenge, but she doesn't really give much factual basis for those concerns, even though Trump said it again and again and again. And you don't really see that in the Fox News Sunday news summary. Not much about that. Not much about the Democrats' response that you saw in the previous two news summaries. Just news is different on Fox, I guess, and that's what you see there. And you can compare it to the last two news summaries, and then this one is about 4.5 minutes from CBS News Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan does her news summary about the election results, and then Robert Costa comes in to talk about the Trump plans for a second term that you kind of heard from Fox News. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. As we wrap up campaign 2024, the scope of Republican control in Washington over the next few years is coming into focus. Overnight, CBS projected Donald Trump the winner in Arizona, giving him a complete electoral vote sweep of the 7 battleground states. With a final tally of 312 electoral votes, Republicans scored their biggest White House win in 36 years. Republicans will also control the Senate with at least 52 seats, and there are 2 races that have not yet been called by CBS News. Control of the House is still to be determined, with a few contests outstanding, but CBS News rates it as leaning Republican at this point. We begin this morning with what we've learned about the incoming Trump administration, personnel, priorities, and more. We turn now to Robert Costa. Bob, good to have you here. I know you've been speaking to your sources. What will this second term look like?
Great to be with you, Margaret. In recent days, I've spoken to President-elect Trump, called him up on the phone along with his top advisors and allies. And what's notable about this transition is that unlike in 2016, when he was elected as a Washington outsider, now he knows all the players in Washington. And he alone, more than any other aide, is evaluating the personnel and possibilities around him. And he reflected in one of our conversations about how he sees his mandate, that he has a movement and a base and now a party that's fully behind him. And he wants to make sure that anyone who comes on board has his same vision for that mandate and for his perceived level of support. And you've seen in recent days, people around Trump in the wider orbit are trying to recommend a lot of names, but it's Trump himself who's saying to his top aides like Susie Wiles, his incoming chief of staff, that he wants to make sure that this is not a chaotic process and it's reflective of where he wants to go more than any other kind of council. And on foreign policy, for example, you see names like Senator Bill Hagerty, Senator Marco Rubio, former Ambassador Rick Grenell, all people who identify with Trump's vision, but those who have had issues with Trump in the past about how he perceives foreign policy, like For example, former Ambassador Nikki Haley or former Secretary Mike Pompeo are now out of the process. And it's not because of any personal trouble with Trump, I'm told. It's because at the end of the day, Trump wants to make sure things are moving along smoothly on ideological and policy lines come January.
Do we know what it was with Mike Pompeo, who served him quite loyally for 4 years as CIA director and Secretary of State? Was it his support, for example, of Ukraine?
It's just a different orbit around Trump right now. The president-elect has people like Donald Trump Jr., Elon Musk. He has Steve Bannon on the outside advising him. These are people who are non-interventionists. These are people who aren't traditional Republican hawks. That's not to say some hawks won't end up in this administration, or some Wall Street figures might end up in this administration as well. I'm told by my sources that the president-elect is not ruling out mainstream Republicans or more centrist Republicans from joining his team. But at this point, he's moving quickly to make sure his base, his party, in his image is reflected in the personnel picks fully.
What are his priorities for the first 100 days, or is that too traditional a way of thinking about it?
No, they have a real agenda this time. You remember in 2017, it was somewhat sporadic in how they moved and navigated on health care and taxes. They are moving quickly already behind the scenes to expand the Trump tax cuts, to institute sweeping tariffs across the board. They're also going to try to, on foreign policy, begin negotiations with Ukraine and Russia sometime early next year. And you have mass deportations more than anything galvanizing the Trump people behind the scenes. Of course, they know it's going to be controversial to remove undocumented migrants in a big way across the country. Could be logistically difficult and politically challenging, but they're moving ahead.
Bob Costa, thank you. And we turn now to Tennessee Republican Senator Bill Hagerty.
So, yeah, that was the CBS News summary. I think Robert Costa did a better job there of giving a more balanced view of some of the people who might be in the Trump administration. I don't think you saw Steve Bannon mentioned in the Fox News Sunday news summary about what we might expect from the upcoming Trump administration. I didn't take a clip of Bill Hagerty, even though he might be the Secretary of State in the Trump administration. But down in the video description under sources, you can see the entire Face the Nation episode uploaded free on their YouTube channel at the link that I provided there. I want to finish up with the news summaries. It's about a minute long. The last one is CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash, just covering Trump's sweeping election of all 7 battleground states, and also what we might expect in the upcoming Trump administration. Just teased in a minute here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is watching a clean sweep. This weekend, President-elect Donald Trump is working on staffing and priorities for his second term on the heels of his big victory. All 7 swing states, after CNN projected Arizona for Trump last night. Yesterday, the president-elect ruled out hiring 2 former officials who had gone on to criticize him, his former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, sending a message about how much he will prioritize absolute loyalty this term. As we get a glimpse of how Vice President Kamala Harris is recovering from her loss, playing with her grandnieces over the weekend. On Wednesday, her opponent will meet with President Biden in the Oval Office. While the Democratic Party grapples with their repudiation at the ballot box, independent Senator Bernie Sanders issued a particularly blistering statement this week, accusing Democrats of abandoning the working class. And Senator Bernie Sanders is here with me now.
And I don't have a clip of Bernie Sanders from CNN State of the Union. I'm actually going to show you part of the Jim Jordan interview, which strangely enough is the only place on all the 5 Sunday shows I heard anyone talking about how Democrats lost the 10 million votes. You know, the thing I keep showing, the popular vote 2020 versus 2024, that Trump basically got the same number of voters and Harris was like 10 million less. And Jim Jordan, that's clip 9 coming up. But you also heard Dana Bash there talk about Senator Bernie Sanders' scathing statement attacking Democrats for abandoning the working class. And if I were to come up with my reason for why Kamala Harris lost, why she lost those 10 million voters, it's because I believe that a lot of the Democrat base, the working class voters, don't really believe that the Democrats are fighting for them. You'll hear Bernie Sanders in this next clip talk about that better than I can. And I at least feel vindicated that in 2016 primaries and 2020 primaries, I voted for Bernie Sanders in the California primary both times for all the good it did. We ended up getting Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, and then Joe Biden replaced with Kamala Harris, none of whom were my favorite candidates, and I don't think they really connect or have good, working class, policies for the working class, expanding Medicare, raising the minimum wage, child care. The other thing that I don't think you really hear Bernie Sanders talk about, but one thing I keep thinking about is Democrats keep winning, have shifted to winning the college educated vote. Well, maybe Democrats should be pushing for free tuition at state colleges and universities harder, because more college educated people means more Democratic voters, I guess. But anyway, like I said, Bernie Sanders, I think, makes this argument about the working class much better than I can. And you also get to see Kristen Welker start with his scathing statement that she quotes at the beginning of this segment, and then talks about Nancy Pelosi not very happy about it and making a response, and then, but they're all friends. Bernie Sanders says they're all friends over in this clip.
Senator Bernie Sanders issued a scathing statement after the vice president's loss in what he called a disastrous campaign, saying, quote, "It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them." And Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont joins me now. Senator Sanders, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here on this Sunday after Election Day. Let's start right there. Your criticism incredibly direct. You say you think the Democratic Party has, quote, abandoned the working class. How exactly do you think Democrats have abandoned the working class, Senator?
Look, the working people of this country are extremely angry. They have a right to be angry. In the richest country in the history of the world, today, the people on top are doing phenomenally well, while 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and millions of families worry that their kids are actually going to have a lower standard of living than they do. You got the top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 90%. We're the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all of our people. 25% of our seniors are trying to live on $15,000 a year or less. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. And the gap between the people on top and everybody else is getting wider and wider. And then, Kristen, on top of all of that, we got a corrupt campaign finance system which allows billionaires to buy elections. So if you're an average worker out there, you're saying, hey, I'm working longer and longer hours, going nowhere in a hurry, worried about my kids, and yet the people on top have never had it so good. Where is the Democratic Party? Are they prepared to stand up to these powerful corporate interests, raise the minimum wage, fight for health care for all people, make sure that all of our kids get the quality education that they need, expand Social Security? Are they prepared to do those things? That's the issue that we have to address.
Well, as you know, your statement was met with some sharp reaction as well. This is what Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi had to say. Take a look. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Bernie Sanders has not won. Let me, with all due respect, and I have a great deal of respect for him, for what he stands for, but I don't respect him saying that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class families.
Senator, how do you respond to Nancy Pelosi?
Well, Nancy's a friend of mine, and we've worked together on many issues. But here is the reality. I have to say to Nancy, in the Senate in the last 2 years, we have not even brought forth legislation to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, despite the fact that some 20 million people in this country are working for less than $15 an hour. In America today, we have not brought, in the Senate, we have not brought to the floor the PRO Act to make it easier for workers to join unions. We're not talking about defined benefit pension plans so that our elderly can retire with security. We're not talking about lifting the cap on Social Security so that we can extend the solvency of Social Security and raise benefits. Bottom line, if you're an average working person out there, do you really think that the Democratic Party is going to the mats, taking on powerful special interests and fighting for you? I think the overwhelming answer is no, and that is what has got to change.
Senator, let me zoom out and just ask you about these results. You've heard some of the reaction throughout the Democratic Party. How much do you personally blame President Biden for this loss?
President Biden, when he came into office, said that he would be the most progressive president since FDR. And I think on domestic issues, not foreign policy, on domestic issues, he has kept his word, and the agenda that he has pushed through has been an extraordinarily strong one. But that agenda has got to be placed within the overall context of American society today. And that American society today is one in which tens of millions of working families and elderly people are struggling, while the people on top have never had it so good.
But, Senator, should he have gotten out of the race more quickly, as some are arguing?
I'm not going to. I supported him because I think his agenda was a strong agenda, a working class agenda. I'm not going to look backwards. Kamala ran a strong campaign. She did everything that she could. She decisively won the debate. So to me, it's not just about the campaign. It's about what does the Democratic Party stand for? Do ordinary people say, yeah, that is a party that is fighting for my interest and prepared to take on the big money interest who control the economic and political life of the country? That's, to me, what the issue is.
And I think he pretty much has what the issue is there. I mean, I think the inflation, like the increase of prices 20% during the Biden administration, exacerbated the feeling in the working class that they haven't really gotten much from the Democratic Party over many years. I mean, they've just gotten like weak, watered down. You know, did we have universal health care? Well, we got Obamacare, which is this whole like intricate Rube Goldberg contraption that still includes all the insurance companies in there, and and the minimum wage. No, I mean, wages for the last year and a half, wages have actually outpaced inflation finally in the Biden administration, but that doesn't make up for the years where inflation ate away at wages in the beginning of the Biden administration, which, as I said earlier, not actually Biden's fault, but that is just a result of the pandemic that was worldwide, and the United States actually did better than most industrialized countries, but that doesn't really help in terms of how it affects voters. Also, you heard Bernie Sanders in that clip mention how he thought that Biden had one of the most progressive domestic policies since FDR, and he did get some things done in a difficult Congress, but, where he had to get by Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema in order to, for the budget reconciliation, or they never got rid of the filibuster, of course. But when he said domestic policy, he's, of course, referring to the Biden support for Israel, and I think that may have suppressed a lot of Democratic base voters. A lot of the left people on the left I work with talk about the genocide in Gaza and are really repelled from the Democratic Party, both by what Joe Biden armed Israel through the whole conflict, and though they tried to moderate somewhat and get a ceasefire, that never happened, and there are 40,000 40,000 casualties in Gaza around, and I saw just today that one study said that about 75% of those were women and children. Even Israel admits like half of them were women and children. So that's like 20,000 civilian casualties, even under Israel's numbers. So I think that also may have been something that is responsible for those some of those 10 million voters who didn't show up for the Democrats this time. But I want to follow up Senator Bernie Sanders' excellent argument as to what the Democratic Party has been missing and why I voted for him in 2016 and 2020 in the primaries with a representative, Ro Khanna, who represents Silicon Valley here in California, and has a very similar argument to what Bernie Sanders said, and then also responds to the argument I keep hearing from, centrist corporate Democrats. And of course, on Morning Joe, it's been like incessant, like this is because they supported transgender rights and the crazy people on the left or what won Trump the election. And I think he has a good response. This is a shorter clip, but it includes some of the working rights, working class policy need argument, plus the response to that over here.
When we look at CBS polling, when you compare Harris in 2024 to Biden in 2020, you see clearly that the Democratic coalition lost support among Latino voters, young voters, women. Republicans really made gains here with men of color as well. Why do you think there is this fracturing?
We did not have a compelling enough economic vision. The Democratic Party should have one simple mission, and that is to address the economic hardships and struggles of many Americans, not just working class Americans, a large slice of Americans who feel the American dream has slipped away for their families and their kids. And you have new voices, congresspeople like Pat Ryan, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, Chris Deluzio, who are saying, look, we need to have a vision on building new factories, on helping raise minimum wage, on dealing with childcare, and emphasize that our party has a better economic story. I think that can unify our party, moderates and progressives, and it transcends race and will help us with Latino voters, black voters, white working class voters. And we have a better vision than Donald Trump on that.
It's interesting in this Monday morning quarterbacking that's happening to hear from so many Democrats now who are saying that they think that economic message should have been front and center, but that they felt constrained somehow by this focus on identity politics. Tom Suozzi of New York brought that up, talking about Republicans being able to weaponize anarchy on college campuses, defunding the police, and gender questions and girls' sports. Do you think this, movement, woke politics, really was incredibly damaging to the left? Because a large part of that came from the progressive wing on which you are a member.
Well, I have always said that we need to be emphasizing the economic issues, but I don't think we should run away for standing up for trans rights, for standing up for equal rights for people, for teaching American history responsibly. You can be true to your values with two things, Margaret. One, if someone disagrees with you, we need to respect that disagreement, not cancel or shame them. Don't shy away from your convictions, but have a reasonable conversation. I did that with Megyn Kelly on a podcast on trans rights. I stuck to my position, but we had a reasonable conversation. The second thing is, if we emphasize the economic hardships people are facing. I've got $12 trillion in my district in Silicon Valley, while towns like Johnstown were hollowed out, Galesburg, Illinois were hollowed out. We can build new factories. We can build new industry. We can create new economic opportunity. We have a vision of how to do that. President Biden started it. I think we can win over people, even if they may not agree with us on a particular social issue.
So I think that's a reasonable argument from Ro Khanna, apparently broadcasting from Pleasanton, which is not in Silicon Valley, but is in the Bay Area. I guess maybe is that part of his district in Contra Costa? I know he just said he represents Silicon Valley. So the argument that you don't have to shy away from supporting transgender rights or whatever, as long as you have a strong economic argument, the people are going to support you, even though they don't agree on every single social issue. I think that is really the best approach, and certainly not one that's been tried so far. I mean, not very well anyway. And that would be my agreement there with both those two Democrats. And now I'm going to show you three Republicans, starting with Representative Jim Jordan here, where Dana Bash asked him on CNN State of the Union about how at the beginning of the election night, Trump started complaining about they were stealing votes in Pennsylvania or something, and then when he won, and like all that talk went away. So are you like? Her implication, she's trying to get Jim Jordan to admit that all that talk about fraud is like bogus, just in case you lose, right? And of course he doesn't admit it, and he goes off on this whole thing where he mentions how Democrats had 10 million less votes this time. And I watched this a couple times, and I'm not sure. I think he might be claiming that Democrats had 10 million fake votes in 2020, and they didn't cheat this time, and so that's why I don't think that's what he's saying. Well, let's watch it again together here, and you can let me know what you think after we do.
Okay, let's talk about the election, because in the run-up to the election, even on election night itself, Donald Trump baselessly accused Democrats of cheating. As soon as the results started to come in and showed them going his way, he stopped. Silence. Nothing about that. I haven't seen you or your colleagues claiming any election irregularities, no rampant voting fraud this time. It seems to me that Republicans claim voting fraud and election integrity when you lose and not when you win.
No, I mean, again, as I said before, this election, I think, was the greatest political comeback we've ever seen. I mean, he did something that even Teddy Roosevelt couldn't do, for goodness sake. And the country.
But you think it was a free and fair election?
No. This election, you just interviewed the Latino, I think, restaurant owner or a restaurant worker, and he said he was tired of all the woke stuff. This election was real simple. You had back-to-back administrations. We got something we very seldom get in American history, American politics. Back-to-back administrations now running for the top job, and people could do a direct comparison. And they said, we like what we had under President Trump versus.
But last time around,
we like the safe streets versus the record
last
crime.
time around, your leader claimed that there were problems with
secure
fraud.
border versus the open border.
Right, those are policies.
That's what this election was about.
That's totally fair. But last time around, it wasn't so much about the policy differences or the personality differences. There were false claims about election fraud when Donald Trump lost. This time, Donald Trump won, and you think the election was free and fair. Do you see there's a little bit of a...
No, I think the Democrats got to ask, why did
there?
we go from getting 81 million to getting 70 million? What happened to those 10 million people? Maybe they need to... Maybe it's not smart to run an election where you have no vision, no record to run on.
Do you believe
you're
that
just
the
going to call the other side names?
Do you believe that the 2024 election was free and fair?
I do.
And why was it different from 2020 when he lost? Is that the only difference?
No, there were concerns about 2020 with all the mail-in voting that happened. You know, Pennsylvania had like 2-point-something million mail-in ballots come in without any signature verification, which was required under Pennsylvania statute. So there were all kinds of concerns with how the 2020 election was carried out. But
there was absolutely
the biggest question Democrats need to be asking, what happened to the 10 million voters that Joe Biden got that didn't come out for Kamala Harris? A bunch of them, President Trump's numbers were right up where they were in 2020, but the Democrats were much lower. I think it's because they had no vision, no record to run on, and they just wanted to call everyone names. Turns out when you tell people, oh, you're fascist, racist, deplorable garbage, they don't like that. And then when you use lawfare to go after their candidate, they don't like that either. Well, that's why they came out. So on top of the economy, on top of the price of gas, on top of the inflation, that's why they voted for President Trump.
We're out of time. I just want to say, for the record, that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in 2020. It went through many, many different court cases. And I do think the name calling,
that's what I was concerned about.
The name calling was very strong on the Republican side of the aisle from the former president, and you know that. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you going through all of this.
You bet.
Yeah, having watched it again, I don't think Jim Jordan was saying that those were 10 million fake votes in 2020. He thinks that Democrats lost those votes for not having vision, for being too, leftist or woke stuff, he said, though he eventually did get to inflation at the end. And there was that little smiling shake of the head at the end when there was name calling on the Republican side, too. And he's like, no, he won't admit that. I don't know. He's going to be a very powerful person for at least the next. Well, let's see if the Republicans can keep the House. It's still that's the one possible bright spot that could still happen. It's leaning Republican, but there are enough outstanding races where it could still. And Trump actually just appointed one of the Republicans from the House, Elise Stefanik, to be the ambassador to the United Nations. So that's like one less seat that they have at the beginning. That who knows? That could even, well, we'll see. Maybe he'll appoint a couple other people from the House or from the Senate, and well, I'm sure they're considering that, but it could still go for the Democrats, and then Jim Jordan won't even be a committee chair anymore. But that's probably not how it's going to go. Now, this next clip is the one I promised earlier of Vivek Ramaswamy talking about deporting dreamers, where he basically says, you know, if your first act as a 2-year-old in the United States is to enter the country illegally, then you don't have a right to stay here. Where he doesn't say the 2-year-old part, but that is what he says. And especially because he's talking about people who basically been here taken as children into the United States when they didn't really have agency, and they've grown up, they're assimilated, they're really integrated into American life. And the thing that really worries me about this deportation policy that Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be talking about is they talk about how they're going to get out the criminals first or whatever, but the thing is that the people like the dreamers, they're a lot easier to find than the so-called criminals that they're going to deport first. Even the people who have deportation orders against them are harder to find than some of the easier to find undocumented people. And well, that's one of the things we're going to find out very early in the Trump administration, especially with Tom Homan, who I protested here in Sacramento when he met with our sheriff, I think like in 2017, or when he was that acting ICE director? Anyway, there's really bad stuff coming down on immigration, and the justification for it is kind of disgusting to watch from Vivek Ramaswamy in this next clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Obviously, Trump's promised, and you've talked a lot about this, the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. First of all, do you really think that we're going to see him round up and deport upwards of 11, sometimes he's put the number as high as 20 million people out of the United States? Is that really going to happen?
Donald Trump's campaign promise was the largest mass deportation in American history. Okay. And he's going to keep that promise. And I'll tell you, let's just start very pragmatically here. I think most Americans agree with this. You take the number of people who have entered the country just in the last 18 to 24 months. That's millions of undocumented immigrants, illegal migrants, who have really no place in this country. Anybody who's committed a crime. Automatically, that already is the largest mass deportation in American history. Now take that to the next level. Not an iota, not a cent of government spending should go to subsidize this, not to sanctuary cities, not to federal aid to people who are in this country illegally. And we're going to see a large number, by the millions, of self-deportations as well. And so these are pragmatic places to start that would give us, yes, the largest mass deportation in American history.
But fall far short of 11 million or more.
We're going to go step by step aggressively. Donald Trump's going to stay true to his campaign pledge, but in a way that respects the dignity of the Americans who are already here. Okay, and I do think it's offensive to use, when we have $34 trillion of national debt, government funds to subsidize this type of illegal migration. That's half the problem. And if any illegal migrant is no longer a customer of the welfare state, you're going to see self-deportations combined with deportations of those who enter.
Let me ask you, though, I mean, there's been a lot of attention over the years to people known as the Dreamers. These are people who came into the United States with their parents as young children, grew up here, went to school here, some of them great success stories, but they are still undocumented immigrants. And there's a lot of concern. Some of them are deeply frightened by what they heard from Donald Trump during the campaign. I want to play just two, the words from two of these dreamers of what they've said of their concerns now after the election, and get you to respond.
I could wake up tomorrow and there could be an immigration agent, an ICE agent outside of my house or outside of my mom's house. We don't know.
We are not what you're seeing on TV. We are people who have been living here for over 10 years who call Arizona home.
I mean, they're worried about getting that knock on the door.
Look, I say this as the kid of legal immigrants to this country, as the proud child of legal immigrants to the United States of America. If your first act of entering this country broke the law, that doesn't allow you to remain in this country. You have no right to enter the United States.
I mean, they came in as
illegally,
2 or 3,
illegally.
5 years old.
Well, let me just say a few words about this. I think we're going to be pragmatic. A few basic principles that all Americans agree with are this, okay? One is no migration without consent. Think about your nation like a body. Number two is that consent should only be granted and should be granted to migrants who benefit the United States of America. But those who enter without consent must be removed.
So
and I think that those are very pragmatic principles.
So they must be removed, these people that have spent their entire lives growing up.
I'm going to separate two discussions here. First is let's talk about what the legal immigration system ought to look like. Yeah. Do we have a broken legal immigration system? Yes, we do. But I think the first step is going to be to restore the rule of law, to do it in a very pragmatic way, Jonathan, pragmatic way that says, let's just start. I don't think you disagree with me. I would hope not. I don't think most Americans do, to say those who have entered in the last couple of years, they haven't established roots in the country. Those who have committed a crime, they should be out of this country. That is by the millions. That alone would be the largest mass deportation. Combine that with ending government aid for all illegals. You see self-deportations. And I want to say one more thing, because this is important to the second term. Don't forget the second mass deportation that we require as well, and I use this figuratively. The mass deportation of millions of unelected federal bureaucrats out of the D.C. bureaucracy.
We're out of time, but I do want to talk to you about that in the future. Just very quickly, we are out of time. What are you going to do?
Yeah, so that was Vivek Ramaswamy trying to justify deporting people who've been here since 2, 3, 4, 5 years old and grown up here and are really great contributing members of our community, but because their first act as a 2-year-old was to enter illegally, they have no right to stay, and whether, those rights are created by the policies of our government. And I think that if the Trump administration starts deporting people who aren't the bad people, who many of the voters seem to think Trump was going to go after, if it ends up being those 2 women you saw scared in Jonathan Karl's questioning of Vivek Ramaswamy, that hopefully there'll be some pushback even amongst a U.S. population, a majority of whom say they support mass deportations, or maybe it will get worse. I don't know. But that's one of the things that I'm least looking forward to from the Trump administration, because that's going to come early and it's going to come hard, whatever the mass deportation plan is going to be. So that's something to not look forward to, but that's going to happen. And I'm going to get to the final newsmaker clip for you here now. Florida Representative Byron Donalds, who is on Fox News Sunday, where he gets very lightly cross-examined about what should Trump's critics be scared that he might take revenge, and Byron Donalds responds that the whole thing is a lie, gets no factual pushback from the host Shannon Bream. In the final newsmaker clip I will show you before the bonus Cheech and Chong, the kittens clip at the end over here.
Let's talk about his critics, who have now ominous warnings now that he is once again president-elect. David French writing at the New York Times, if Trump was telling the truth about his intentions, then he will attempt a campaign of retribution and mass deportation that will fracture families, create chaos in American communities, and potentially even result in active duty troops being deployed to our cities. Here's what your House colleague, Democratic Congressman Richie Torres, had to say.
One of the fundamental differences between his first presidency and his subsequent presidency is the fact that he now enjoys absolute immunity, and he seems to be intent on exacting revenge against his political enemies.
How do you respond to Americans who say they now are fearful about a second Trump presidency?
For the American people who've been listening to these lies from the Democratic left, I would tell you this is not something that Donald Trump has ever spoken to or he's committed to whatsoever. There's no enemies list. I mean, yeah, there are people who've been opposed to him, but he is focused on the American people. Job number one is securing our border and beginning the process of deporting illegal immigrants out of our country. Job number two is getting our economy thriving again, becoming energy dominant again. That's his focus. His focus is the American people, not some enemies list that only gets talked about in the Daily Kos or Salon.com or any other place like that. He's focused on making our country great. And what will happen in our country is success is going to be the measurement that he will use to demonstrate he's back in the White House and back in charge of running this nation. The metric is success. There is no other measure.
Okay, to that point, Joe Rogan, who was a late endorser of President Trump, says he now does have to take this sweeping victory. He's got great opportunity to try to bring things together and get things done.
I don't know. Donald Trump pivoting to be a uniter. I don't think that's going to happen. It would be an extremely unexpected positive outcome if he all of a sudden moderates his positions to try to unify the country and not just keep the 74 point whatever million people who voted for him both in 2020 and 2024. Maybe he would like to, for his legacy, to show that he's a great president, that and who was it I saw? I think it was it George Conway? Kellyanne Conway's husband, the former conservative lawyer who was a never Trump conservative, who I believe he said that Trump has a need to be loved. So maybe we can hope for the best, but I am not really hopeful. What Byron Donalds says didn't make me hopeful, and with the Supreme Court, as you heard Richie Torres in the clip that Shannon Bream played, the Supreme Court has given Trump immunity, and in such a way that anything he does with the Justice Department is now immune. Now he has presidential immunity, even if he tells his attorney general to go arrest Kamala Harris tomorrow with no evidence. That is not a crime. It's not a crime to conspire to deprive none of that, even if, there's so much that has immunity on now. I don't even really want to start thinking about it, but that is a subject that I guess I'll be exploring as I wind down the Monday Media Mix-Ups. I realize that I have 10 episodes after this one left that I'm going to do all the way through January 20th, 2025, which it turns out is a Monday. So that should be my final Monday Media Mix-Up live stream. It's not going to be my last video on YouTube. It's not probably even going to be my last live stream on YouTube. I might do some live streams, and I'm definitely going to do some edited, produced videos. But unless something changes, Monday, January 20th will be the last time I do a weekly live stream. I think it's been a few years of Mondays and then like 7 years of Sundays before that. I think it's been almost a decade where I've done a weekly show either every Sunday or every Monday. So that'll be stopping on Monday, January 20th, 2025. I hope you will join me for these final episodes as we watch the ramp up to the Trump administration and figure out what we're going to do to try to minimize the damage, I guess. And I'll tell you some of the things I know the ACLU is going to be doing through my local activism and some of my briefings I get from being on the board of the ACLU of Northern California about some of the issues that will be at the forefront of the resistance to the Trump administration. And maybe we can still keep something salvageable and stop an authoritarian government from taking hold in the next 4 years. That I don't know. But I guess we'll see. And now to finish up the live stream, I guess I'll give you the bonus Cheech and Chong, the kittens clip I promised earlier. This is kind of a weird out of focus thing that happened in between like the litter box and the cat tree earlier today. I got some extreme close-ups of both the cats. Maybe a mew in here, and the 20-second Cheech and Chong clip I'll end the program with over here. Okay, it's kind of your moment of kitty zen there to end the program. I don't know if I'll have a reason to upload a video other than the live stream this week. It might happen. Otherwise, I guess I'll see you next Monday and all the Mondays through Monday, January 20th, 2025. 10 more episodes until then, or until I have some other reason to upload a video. I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.